Hi everyone, this is Jim. Before we actually start, could I just get a quick show of hands? I want to make sure that you can actually see what's on the screen and also hear the audio before I start getting it carried away with myself. So could you maybe just open up your Q&A and say, yes, you can hear, or no, you can't hear? Obviously, no, you can't hear, there'll be no responses to that. Okay, thank you for that. Rebecca, that's good to know that you can hear me. Thank you, Warren, that's good. Okay, obviously if you're struggling to hear, then don't worry, this is all being recorded and it'll be available for you a little bit later on. I wanted to welcome you to the PPC Coaching Masterclass. This is actually going to be the first of a number. I think 5 is the number that I've got to thus far. There might be more, I don't know. Of basically teaching you from a sort of beginning to end process of how you can become very proficient in handling PPC campaigns. My name is Jim Banks. I'm the CEO of a company called Jim Banks Consulting, and as it says on the screen there, I'm a Google Plus PPC social media trainer and coach for your business. That's what I do on a sort of day-to-day basis. So before we actually start, what I thought we'd do is we'd start off with a little bit of housekeeping. It's always good to get a bit of a housekeeping out of the way before we start. So here are just some general rules that the workshop's going to be covering today. So in terms of housekeeping, one of the things I'm a big fan of is I'm a big fan of sharing, being caring. So if you wanted to kind of encourage some other people to come along before we get into the kind of the meat and potatoes, if you want to tweet or post on Google Plus using the hashtag of PPC Masterclass, that would be great. And obviously don't bother with hashtags on Facebook because they're pointless. In terms of time scale, I'm planning on this particular session being about an hour. It might be more or less depending on how much rambling we do and Q&A at the end. And really what this particular session is, as I said, this is the first one of a number of sessions, and really what I'm doing is I'm setting the scene for the rest of the sessions to come. So in this particular one, you will learn things, but I'd probably be safe to guess that you're not going to make a fortune just on the content from within this particular session. I would like to add, I mean, I don't ordinarily do it, but I might occasionally curse or be critical of companies, and if you're going to be offended by the odd swear word here and there, then I won't be offended if you leave at any point in time. And as I mentioned before, this is the first of 5 sessions. Each one will probably last around about an hour. Now, one thing I would like to put, I mean, this is something that the FTC require people to put in. On occasions, there will be links to products and services that I might get a commission for if you choose to buy it through my link. If I recommend it, the chances are that I've recommended it because it's valuable to you in terms of making money on PPC. It'll make your life easier, but obviously it's entirely up to you. You can choose not to buy, find another link, or find another way to get the information. That's entirely down to you. And obviously, as I mentioned before, it is my intention to record the webinar. However, that might not work. So I apologize in advance if the recording doesn't kind of come through. And obviously the people that didn't come and were hoping to catch the recording, it doesn't really matter because they won't hear this anyway. Okay, so here's the kind of skinny on why I'm actually doing this particular series of webinars. First off, there's definitely a lack of trained people to manage campaigns for advertisers. And to be honest with you, there has been since PPC started. I'm going to go into a little bit of the history of sort of PPC and where it started all from. But generally speaking, there's a distinct lack of trained people. So one of the objectives for me is I want to try to get more people trained to manage campaigns for advertisers. Second thing is that there's sort of 2 ways to handle PPC campaigns. There's the way that the PPC providers want you to do it, and then there's my way. And I can prove that my way has worked better in the long term, plus it's more cross-platform, because obviously Google know Google, and Microsoft know Microsoft, but obviously Google don't know Microsoft, and Microsoft don't know Google. But more importantly, I want you to feel confident to work with me in the future. I'm an advertiser who needs help. An advertiser who needs help with PPC, an affiliate who needs help with PPC, or someone looking for a job in PPC. And lastly, the reason I'm doing this is I actually provide private group coaching, in-house training, one-to-one training, and I also have a private forum to assist advertisers and affiliates, all of which add value but ultimately cost money. And I'm hoping that you like the training sufficiently to feel confident that it'll be money well spent to join up and work with me moving forward. So those are really the kind of rationale behind it, and that's why this particular session is free for you. So what does the training schedule actually look like? Hang on a second. A few guys have said that they're having problems with the audio. I think if you want to listen to the audio, you need to click on the listen button. Yeah, that might seem a bit of a funny way to kind of go about it, because obviously if you can't hear me, you can't hear. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, so in terms of the training schedule, what it's going to look like, it's going to be one call every week for the next 5 weeks. I mean, the calls are going to last for around about 1 hour. Obviously not necessarily cast in stone. The calls will be recorded and available to the attendees after the event, and the course will also be made available publicly. So for those of you that are struggling with the audio, then obviously you'll be able to listen to the recording. If there are any resources, case studies, spreadsheets, then obviously what I'd like to be able to do is I'd like to be able to send you the information about those through the method of email. That was one of the reasons why I wanted you to sign up in the first place to come along to this. To enable me to send you the emails to say this is where this particular resource is going to be housed. And if you continue to subscribe to the list, you'll continue to get them. You'll be expected to carry out. The next thing I'm going to ask is, am I qualified to teach you? No, I'm not, because I actually failed. The Google have a professional qualification called Google AdWords Qualified Professional, and I actually failed that exam twice. But obviously, I would kind of like to put forward, not that I'm saying I'm a NASCAR or F1 driver, but I think if you actually put the guys that drive NASCAR or F1 cars into take their driving test now, I think the chances are that they would fail their test, probably for speeding. So I've been buying PPC since 2000, which is coming up to 13 years ago, and that's pretty much since the start of it. I've spent a lot of money on my own, and I've also spent clients' money on every vertical that you could imagine. And I've transformed a lot of people's lives by recruiting and training some of the best practitioners in the industry. Some of the people that came to work with me very early on are now sort of heading up the global teams of personnel in big agencies around the world. And certainly when you speak to these people, they're very impressed by the training that I've been able to provide. But I've spent in excess of $100 million of my own and clients' money on PPC traffic, and generated a vast amount of traffic, leads and sales for clients on both my own web properties and their properties. But I think ultimately what I do is I actually push the envelope. So I'm always trying to find different ways to do things to kind of make for a better experience. So in terms of what you're going to learn in this particular module, this session, what we're going to cover is we're going to cover the history of PPC from the beginning. I'm going to give you a little bit about my history in respect to PPC. I'm going to talk a little bit about what PPC actually is. We're going to go into a little bit of detail about why it works. When you actually think of the model and what it's all about, it doesn't make any sense at all, but for some strange reason it works incredibly well. I'm going to look at some of the reasons why advertisers fail, a little bit about the current PPC landscape, but in future sessions we're going to go into the landscape and the specifics of how to set things up and that sort of thing in much, much more detail. My intention is that a lot of the future sessions will be much more sort of demonstration, hands-on, actually running through sort of campaigns, and that's the intention for the future sessions. And in terms of, what you'll also learn in this particular session is what you need to succeed, right? So that'll be things around your technique and also the tools that you might want to use. And unfortunately, I'm taking you back to school. There is actually going to be some homework from attending this session, but it's fairly simple and straightforward in terms of what I'm looking for you to do at the end of the session. So let's talk a little bit about the history of PPC itself. There's a guy called Jeffrey Brewer, and there's a picture of him there. He was the founder and CEO of a company called Overture, and Overture were formerly known as GoTo, and they actually set up in 1998, and they went public in 99, and ultimately they became Overture Services in 2001. And Jeffrey Brewer is the guy who you can largely trace the origins of PPC in the format that it's in today, and you can trace it all back to him. So certainly people like me, I'm very grateful to the likes of Jeffrey for coming up with this model. Like I said, I mean, I'm sure when he sat down and started explaining it to people, they must have thought he was smoking something, because when you actually look at what it is and how it works, it's completely alien. But for some strange reason, it's worked incredibly well. So obviously, Overture, which, as I said, was formerly called GoTo, went public in 99 and became Overture Services in 2001. Yahoo subsequently bought them in 2003 for $1.6 billion. And I think, when you kind of look at the marketplace back then, I mean, $1.6 billion in terms of a value for a company of that size, is tiny now compared to some of the transactions that have been done in the last few years. But certainly at that particular point in time, there wasn't anywhere near as much traffic and advertisers, and the PPC marketplace is a lot smaller than it is now. In terms of, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm actually from the UK, and one of the companies that operated over here was a company called eSpotting, and these were the European pioneers for PPC, and they were actually founded in 2000. They managed to get a trade sale done to a US company called FindWhat in 2004. And when I was researching into the sort of stats, in 2000, I think eSpotting took their revenue from about £80,000 up to about 40 million in 2004, just before they sold to FindWhat. They then morphed into a company called Neva, you may or may not have heard of, and then in 2009, the ad network piece of Neva was actually bought by a company called AdKnowledge, and they continue to sort of trade in the marketplace today. But I'm sure you're sort of sitting there and thinking, well, my understanding of PPC, it's really all about Google and it's all about Microsoft. Those are the two companies that I'm aware of, or possibly Bing, but obviously Microsoft and Bing are one and the same. So let me talk a little bit about Google. I know this is a fairly busy slide here that has got a lot of information on it, but to go back to the beginning for Google, I mean, Google, as you probably are aware, they're predominantly an engineering company. Their original thesis, when Larry and Sergey wrote the plan of what Google was going to be, their commercial proposition was going to be in the form of selling enterprise companies to kind of to make sort of their money that way. But when they actually started AdWords in 2000, they actually sold the inventory that they had available on a CPM basis, which ultimately proved to be an incredibly bad choice for them. I know a few people that were able to capitalize on some incredibly vast amounts of traffic for next to nothing in terms of the CPM cost. And I think it was largely on the back of the Overture model. I think in actual fact, in order to use the Overture model, Google gave a percentage of their business to Overture in return for them being able to operate the model that they currently operate now. Yeah. It's safe to say that Google, funnily enough, were actually late to the party. So in terms of the kind of process, I mean, Google, when they first started out, I mean, they pitched their business as what they were trying to do is they were trying to capture advertising spend, and they were trying to capture it from TV, radio, print, plus the kind of PPC providers that were the likes of Overture, eSpotting, Find What. The way that they obviously enticed people to work with them, certainly on the agency side, was they were offering a discount off the media cost to an agency of 15%, because that's traditionally, certainly here in the UK, that's how TV, radio, and print was sold. And clearly they felt that they were competing against TV, radio, and print, and they wanted to put in place a marketplace that would work. Initially, when it first started out, they only had their own property, so it would be Google.com, .de, etc., and Google partners, so the likes of AOL, Ask, Netscape, were the partners that they had at that particular point in time. Then in 2003, the Google AdSense platform, which was the platform that they used to provide publishers with the ability to sell inventory on their sites through the Google platform, that was actually created in 2003. 2004, Google became a public company. But at the point in time that they sort of changed to be a publicly traded company, they moved the goalposts. They introduced smart pricing, because I think what they realized is a lot of the publishers onto the Google AdSense platform had found ways in which they could game the system to maximize their revenue, obviously at the detriment of the advertisers. So they introduced smart pricing. They got very aggressive with some of the publishers that they worked. They kicked a lot of them out. And obviously the smart pricing then helped to eliminate the publishers that Google didn't really want to have running traffic to them anymore. And I think as they became a publicly traded company, it was important that they put those sorts of mechanisms in place. They then went on a bit of a buying spree, and as you can see there in 2006, they bought YouTube. And at the time, I think they paid probably double the price of what they should have done for YouTube. But I think anyone that looks at the model of what YouTube is and what it does and how much traffic there is and everything, they're getting a vast return on the money that they paid to buy YouTube back in 2006. They bought a company called DoubleClick back in 2007, and DoubleClick predominantly were a sort of display media platform for agencies and high volume advertisers. And it took Google probably 3 years to actually integrate a lot of the technology that DoubleClick had into the current proposition. And really in the last 2 years, you're starting to see in some of the transformations in the Google platform, some of the features and benefits of the DoubleClick platform that they kind of acquired. 2009, they got quite heavily involved in mobile. They bought probably the dominant mobile ad network at that particular point in time, which was a company called AdMob. And then just in the last sort of 2 or 3 months or so, what Google did was they clearly saw what was happening with Facebook as a big threat to them in the PPC landscape. They saw a lot more money moving to social. So what they did was they bought a company called Wildfire. And basically what Wildfire are is they're a sort of social media platform. So they help advertisers with some of their sort of advertising in respect of social media campaigns that people might put in place. So that's really, that's a fairly lengthy slide talking about Google, but clearly Google are the dominant player, and I thought it was good to just give people an understanding as to what Google was all about and some of the historical things that have come from their entry into the market to where they are now. So let's talk a little bit about Microsoft. Microsoft clearly were very late to the party, and I think the very first couple of iterations of Microsoft's entry into the PPC landscape failed dismally. Then they created Bing. Bing managed to get a little bit of traction, but clearly they were still playing catch-up. Yahoo, as you guys probably are aware, were having some difficulties, some of the technology, people, and so on. So what Bing and Yahoo decided to do is they decided to form a strategic alliance, and basically now although basically buying on Bing and Yahoo together. Just in the last extent of chipping away at Google's market share. Clearly at this particular point in time, Google still has a fairly dominant position in the market. There are other players in the PPC ecosystem, and in future sessions we're going to cover these in some detail. Look at a formidable player in terms of the people that they have. They're changing their platforms all the time in terms of what they're trying to offer. We're talking about Facebook getting involved in search. And again, it's one of those sort of things as to how that's going to play out. Nobody really knows. But clearly, Facebook is something where it's a platform that a lot of people are getting some success with. And certainly in the very early days, Facebook was incredibly successful for some of the kind of first mover advantage advertisers that they had on their books. LookSmart, funny enough, was one of the companies probably back in 2000-ish that they had a very solid relationship with Microsoft, and a relationship with Microsoft that yielded a huge amount of traffic for them. They're a publicly traded company, very, very cash rich, and even though a lot of people don't really know much about LookSmart, they still have a significant amount of traffic. And certainly one of the areas that I've been having some success with is in buying LookSmart traffic because, again, it's a less competitive landscape. Not very many people are aware of it. Seven Search are one of those companies. They've been around for what seems like an eternity. Again, they're probably like 2002, 2003 when they started out. They had a very bad reputation for a period of time, and a lot of people, the results that people got from Seven Search were just not good enough. So I think a lot of people defected. I know that Seven Search have been spending a lot of time, building a sort of a better publisher base to deliver their traffic, and certainly the results that we've been seeing from some of the Seven Search traffic we bought has been quite encouraging. In the B2B space, there's a company called Business.com. They have a sort of a PPC platform for people that are looking to do B2B traffic. And again, I think it's one of those, yes, Google will still give you a good return, but Business.com, if you're in B2B, would be a good proposition to look at. Amazon, they actually, I think they've been sort of dabbling in PPC for a little while. They created their own platform called A9, and basically Amazon in the new year, they're actually going pretty much head-to-head with Google in the comparison shopping space. I mean, at the moment, a lot of the traffic that people get where they're selling products on Amazon, the traffic's coming to Google, going to Amazon to sell the products. I think what Amazon are basically saying is they can cut Google out of that loop, and they can just become a one-stop shop for people that are selling products on Amazon. I think what they would like to do is they'd ideally like people to sell the product through Amazon, but if they want to sell it independently through their own tool, then one of them to do that and use the Amazon sort of scale that they have to drive the traffic. And that last point there, it says there are many more platforms. I think it's one of those. It's very much a case of a law of diminishing returns. Obviously, the more players that there are, that you have that go into this, the less return you're going to make. So the ones that I covered on the previous slides and this slide probably account for about 99% of all the traffic. But it might be that there's one little niche platform that delivers great volume for one particular site that you have, and and obviously we'll look at some of those in a little bit more detail as we move through the series. So that's, if you like, the PPC landscape in terms of the companies. I mean, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my history of PPC. I started out working in the online space in 1999. I was working for a web design company. There for 6 months. I then left there to go and work for a premium rate dialer company that specialized in adult and gambling traffic. I then left there and went to work for a telecoms company that did least cost routing, vanity phone numbers, and cable TV. And ironically, a lot of the infrastructure that Google are now buying up with their Google Fiber platform, a lot of the fiber that was laid by the cable companies back in the 80s and 90s, Google are picking it up for pennies in the dollar. Clearly, there's a lot of money raised to dig the roads up to put this cable infrastructure down. And the company that I worked for in 2000 was one of those companies that basically couldn't service their debt because they dug the road up and ran out of cash. Now all of those particular roles that I had ended up in me being laid off. So back in 2000, I spoke to my wife and I said, you know what, I'm a bit fed up of being laid off by companies. So I set up a sort of an agency called Web Diversity. And if you go to Google, search for Jim Banks Web Diversity, you'll find a lot of information about the company. But basically, in November 1st, 2000, Overture UK opened their doors for business, and on November the 3rd, I opened my doors for business. And clearly, they were much more successful for money. But we were actually one of only 10 Overture accredited agencies globally. And basically, what that meant is that we'd been given this accreditation based on the fact that we had a transparent pricing model. We gave good service to the clients that we had, and they came in and they audited what we did and that sort of thing. In terms of our dealing with Google, I mean, it's quite funny. I mean, when it's been to the Google office in the UK now, it's like takes up a whole block. When they first opened the business here in the UK, they had a two-person serviced office in the basement of a building in London, and we were the second agency to kind of sign a deal to work with Google as an agency. But it was very much a case of there was no best practice. There was no, this is how you do it. These are the rules. So in a lot of cases, myself and other people that were working in the space, we were pretty much making the rules up as we went along. In terms of the sort of clients that we worked with, we had a very large number of retail clients. I mean, in the sort of custom-made shirt space, there's a street called Jermyn Street here in London. And I would say at one point in time, we probably had 80% of all the companies that made custom shirts as clients of ours. We managed their PPC campaigns. We did financial services, so that would include mortgages, loans, credit cards, and all that sort of stuff. Gambling was very big here in Europe, so we did a lot of gambling traffic. Funny enough, a lot of a lot of the clients that we had were actually affiliates. I remember talking to one of our bigger clients, in actual fact, who was an affiliate. And if you actually talked to him and said, well, why do you actually outsource your PPC campaigns to Jim? The guy just said he wanted to go fishing. So he got to go fishing. We got to manage a campaign for him. We made him a lot of money. We made ourselves a lot of money. Everyone was happy. We did a lot of lead generation. And I would probably say, I guess over the years that I was managing the campaigns through Web Diversity, we must have had over 1,000 clients through our books. The beauty of it was that very much in the early days, it was a case of success breeding success. So for us, we were very fortunate. We never, ever had to look for a client. People always found us, and we never, ever had to kind of worry about where our next client was going to come from. And I certainly think, even if you look at it today, there are more than enough clients to around all the people that are proficient in managing campaigns. And go back to the very beginning, my first sort of couple of slides, one of the reasons I want to do is I want to train more people so that more agencies can be created to enable more clients to get good service looking after their campaigns. But, funny enough, it was one of those things. As much as we wanted our clients to talk a lot about what we did for them, most of them wanted to keep quiet because they felt that we were actually their secret weapon. Here in the UK, there's a trade publication called NMA, which stands for New Media Age, and we were one of the top 100 agencies on and they did an annual. To exit web diversity in 2006 via a trade sale to a publicly traded company in America, and that then kind of brought about the affiliate years. I'm still quite heavily involved in PPC, but it was a sort of different marketplace altogether. It was a more sort of direct sites that we built ourselves rather than working specifically with clients. We did a lot of stuff in hotels, with subprime finance. Ringtones were a big market for us. Email and zip submits. The arbitrage model was phenomenal. Again, you buy traffic from one source for 10 cents and sell it to another source for 20 cents, and that was the kind of the way the model worked. But it became apparent sort of in this particular period, sort of 2008 through 2010, that I think that the PPC providers were getting a little bit fed up and impatient with the way some of the affiliates that they were working with were conducting their businesses. I mean, when you actually look at it, the likes of Expedia and eBay and all these sorts of companies, I mean, technically they're affiliates. I mean, eBay doesn't own a hotel, it doesn't own an airline. It basically sells hotel rooms for the Hilton or the Inn chain, right? So you could argue and say Expedia are an affiliate, right? But the fact remains that they have a much more robust business model, and people like Google are more than happy to kind of work with them on an ongoing basis. And I think, certainly as we move into sort of some of the other sessions later on, we'll look at the affiliate marketplace, because I know a lot of the people that express interest in coming on the sessions were people that weren't necessarily involved as clients. They were more involved in trying to sell other people's products through the affiliate model, and we'll cover those in a lot more detail as we move forward. So then in 2010, I kind of moved out of the affiliate space in terms of working for other people, and I moved on to become a consultant. And in terms of, for the last 3 years, a lot of the stuff that I've been doing has been more, much more sort of reactive rather than proactive. So, if a client has a problem with a Google slap, they call me. If they have lackluster sales, they call me. If they have a competitor they're concerned about, they call me. If they want to get involved in some guerrilla warfare to try and understand how they can, really get on top of one of their competitors, then, again, I'm the sort of person that they come to. Lastly, the way this particular marketplace has evolved, I mean, there's a vast amount of change that happens almost like on a daily, weekly basis. And a lot of people come to me because I keep abreast of all the changes, and I can educate them on what they need to do in terms of the strategies for their campaigns on an ongoing basis. So let's have a look and talk a little bit about what exactly PPC is. Now, the kind of simplistic terms, the simplistic way of looking at it, it's bought media paid for on a cost per click basis. Now, quite often you'll see CPC and PPC thrown about, CPC standing for cost per click, PPC standing for pay per click. But to all intents and purposes, they're one and the same thing. But effectively, it's a way in which you're given prominence on search engine results. And I've got a couple of screenshots that will just go through that in a little bit of detail. So here's one. The search that we've used here is dog training. And in a lot of the sessions that we're going to look at, for some reason, dog training seems to become one of those things. Whenever anyone trains people on PPC, it always seems to be dog training that they throw up. So I'm not going to make any apologies. If you're involved in the dog training business, or you know anyone that is involved in the dog training business, then you definitely ought to get them to sign up for this for future sessions, because I'm basically going to unravel the whole dog training marketplace and how to look for keyword research and all that sort of stuff. So from that perspective, there'll be for anyone that's involved in that. But with this particular slide, what you can see is there's two ads at the top there I've sort of highlighted with the yellow box and put PPC ads against. Those are PPC ads, and then you have some down the side. Those are also ads, and then the rest of them are the Google universal results. So you've got local results, Wikipedia information, a couple of YouTube videos. So that's kind of one from Google itself. Here's one from AOL. As I mentioned at the beginning, what you have is within Google, you have the Google results, and you then also have Google partners. And AOL have been for quite some time one of Google's biggest partners on the AdSense program. But they're a little bit of a hybrid model. I mean, it says it's enhanced by Google, so it's a little bit of a mixture of both. So AOL put in some of their own results, kind of blend in the Google results as well. So you'd like to think that they would marry up completely the same. So the results that appear on Google would be the same as on AOL, but it's not always the case. So there are obviously some grey areas, because I think when people talk about PPC, in a lot of cases they think of just Google AdWords as the only thing that kind of happens. When you actually look at sort of paying for traffic on a cost per click basis, that throws into the mix video advertising. It throws in click-to-call advertising, pay-per-view advertising, contextual advertising, and obviously banner advertising through both images and text-based banners, whether it's on Google or other platforms. But I think clearly Google with their AdSense program have had a lot of success with text-based ads, and there are an awful lot of that nature out there. In terms of the contextual advertising, quite often you'll see a site, and we'll talk about the providers of these, but you'll see things like there's a company called Chitika and Contera. That's Kontera, and Chitika, Chitika. And effectively what they do is they do sort of in-text advertising. So what you'll see is keywords with, make two green lines underneath them. You hover over that word and it will basically pop up an ad that we'll talk about that. But, you can buy those ads on a PPC basis. And we'll look at some of those in sort of subsequent sessions. So I guess the obvious question that a lot of people say to me was, why does PPC work? Right, and it's actually quite funny when you strip it back to kind of the bare bones of what PPC actually is. So this is a building. This is Selfridges in London, and it's on Oxford Street, as you can see from that particular picture. Now this is a massive department store, does a huge amount of business, and the way I kind of liken the PPC model is, imagine I'm Selfridges and I'm selling my stuff, right? And I'm standing outside the Selfridges front door. People, as they going by, and I'd say, hey, I want to give you some money to come into my store. If you did that, if you paid somebody an amount of money, every single person that walked past come into the store, you would have a store full of people, because everyone would want to do it. And when you think of that about the PPC, it just doesn't make any sense that people would pay money to attract people to come along to their site. But, for some reason, the model worked incredibly well. Example. What you'll find here is you've got, some of the ads have got telephone numbers on, some have got, different things. And we'll talk about those in a lot more detail as we kind of move forward. So let's look a little bit about why some of the advertisers that I speak to, and I'm sure that other people have spoken to, why some of the advertisers that have tried to do PPC campaigns fail. First off, I think the main reason why people fail is that they don't understand their visitors. And that, again, you might think, well, I know who my customers are, right? But in a lot of cases, when you actually look at the advertisers, the ads that are being run, and the landing pages that people are taking them to, there's no kind of real direct correlation between the two. Right? So they don't understand their visitors in terms of who they are and what they want. In a lot of cases, they don't really understand what their competitors are doing. And certainly we'll be covering in some of the later sessions how you can do competitor analysis, how you can do competitor monitoring, how you can make sure that your competitors are not bidding on brand terms related to your business, those types of things. But again, one of the main reasons is there's definitely a lack of call to action in advertising. When there's a company here in the UK called Ronseal, and they have a product called, and their strapline is it does exactly what it says on the tin. And when you actually look at it, I think a lot of advertisers, when they're advertising on Google, they fail to actually tell people what they want them to do. Yeah, and by a call to action, I mean it could be, fill in this, click here, download this. It's something that just entices people to know what you want them to do by seeing the ad. In a lot of cases, you have people that will adopt basically a poor choice of landing page. When you think about it, I mean, if you have a website that's got several hundred pages, you want to try and align your keyword, your ad, and your landing page as closely as possible to make it a good fit. And there are some good techniques which I'll show you in sessions on how you can kind of pull all those three things together to make it a really, really good experience. And ultimately, I think what you'll have is you'll see that there's a misaligned intention with the keyword choice. Yeah, because you might, that particular keyword is going to lead somebody to do this, and their intention is something completely different. So in terms of, I mentioned there on that last point about visitor intent. I mean, there's many reasons as to why people will come to your website, right? And they broadly fall down into one of four areas. They either want or need information, so in other words, they're researching something. They want to make a purchase, they're looking for entertainment, or they want to belong, and that's part of, they want to be part of a community. Yeah, so there's maybe some affinity and that sort of thing. So what I would suggest is, if you want to try and make it so that you've got a good experience, what you need to try and do in terms of getting around that, you need to try to draw up a list of website personas. In other words, the people that are going to go to this particular section of your site, what do they look like? How old are they? What sex are they? What sort of income bracket do they fall into? Do they have children? So the more you can kind of put out around the personas about what specifically the visitors that you're trying to attract to your website will be, that then gives you the ability to say, okay, well, I need to make sure that my wording, my color scheme, all the information on the site is relevant to that particular person, right? So if your target audience is, silver surfers, 55, 60, 65-year-old people, and all of your terminology, color scheme is all designed more for an 18 to 25-year-old, then it's not going to be a good fit. You're not going to get a good result. We're going to look at a little bit about some of the measurement tools, because I think, I've always been a big fan. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Yeah, and I think I'm stunned at how many advertisers spend, tens of thousands of pounds on a daily basis on PPC traffic and have absolutely no measurements in place as to whether it's being successful or whether it's not. Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, they go, well, I spend money and I make sales and I think I'm doing okay. But the reality is that they're not measuring it in the way that they should, right? And they probably have 10% of their keywords that are doing phenomenally well, 10% of their I think, when you look at it, you've got to get to the point where you say, right, okay, so it's... You've got to look at things like detailed reporting. Again, one of the things you tend to find is that a lot of people will have one strategy for every day of the week, all the times of the day. And when you actually look at it, I mean, just think of your own sort of user behavior when it comes to using the internet. I mean, in a lot of cases, people go to work between 9 and 5, they come home, they have a bit of dinner, they watch a bit of TV, maybe sit with a tablet or their iPhone or their Android device, and they do a bit of digging around and whatnot. You need to understand when people, so these personas that you've created, you need to understand when they use your sites, what they use them for, and then you can kind of formulate your strategy to align with what they're actually looking for. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people are looking at now is, one of the sectors that we've done a lot of work with in the past is the dating space. And one of the things that we look at is we actually analyze what the weather's doing, because when you think about the weather, if the weather's nice, then a lot of people that might ordinarily stay at home will go out because the weather's good. If it's raining or snowing, or as at the moment here in the UK it's pretty cold, you know, a lot of people will stay sort of at home. So you could have your campaigns optimized so that if that's the case, if the weather was good, you lower your bids, and if your weather's bad, you kind of increase them. And it's that type of granularity that makes the difference between a good campaign and a great one. So in terms of looking at how people use your site, so again, if you have a particular path that you expect people to go through, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to analyze and make sure that the path that they're going on is the one that you want them to take. And if they're not, then clearly they're deviating for a reason. And it might be, you know, you've got a link off to your Facebook page at the point in time when they should be filling in their credit card details. You're asking them to become a fan of yours on Facebook, and they're gone. Yeah, and it's those sorts of things that you want to be able to analyze over time and optimize the process. So the other thing is, in a lot of cases, people think it's that what they do operates in a bubble and in isolation, when the reality is that you need to understand the competitive landscape, because, you know, if you understand what your competitors are doing, you can understand what your strategy should be on that basis. And I'll give you an example of that. In a lot of cases, you will get crazy people, crazy advertisers, and what they will do is they will basically say, I don't care how much it costs, I want to be number one on Google for this term. And the reality is that they'll probably bleed money from every pore in their body because they're bidding on a term that, generally speaking, will not convert into sales, right? So when they're looking at the sort of sales results and going, oh, you know, we're losing money, it's like, well, you've got this suicidal approach to your campaign, and you're basically saying you want to be number one, and that's not the best thing to do. So it is a complex model, and I think if you understand what those complexities are, you'll have a much better chance of succeeding with it on an ongoing basis. But the one thing I would like to say, one of the biggest cause of advertisers failing when they actually run PPC campaigns, and it's not just with Google, it's with everyone, all PPC providers' standard features are horrible and designed to spend your money. So if you actually say, okay, well, I'm going to set up an account and I'm going to set up a campaign and I'm going to spend some cash, you know, by default, all the features that they have switched on are designed for you to spend money and not necessarily to make money. And what I would suggest is, you know, if we do nothing else through the course of these series of training sessions, if you just sort of take that point and adopt the principles of that, you will do incredibly well on an ongoing basis with a campaign. Now, what I want to say, in 2012 alone, Google has actually introduced over 100 new features and core functionalities to their AdWords product. So ultimately, that's the way I look at it. That's 100 tripwires for advertisers, because in a lot of cases, these features are reduced, and for whatever reason, again, I'd probably go back to, certainly in the case of Google are an engineering company, Microsoft are a software company. These providers are notorious for not telling you the things that will have changed that ultimately will affect your advertising campaigns. Yeah, and one of the things that I think, you know, if you think about it, if you have a feature that changes, you capitalize on around know about it, even in the domain, then you have a first mover advantage. You can make an absolute killing at that point. It's what you need to kind of have in place to succeed. So the first thing you need to have objectives in terms of what do you want to do, and I mean be specific about that, right? And then what you want to be able to do is to translate those objectives into measurable goals, right? And in terms of the goals, what I would suggest you do is you kind of break them down into micro and macro. Some skills in a lead application. So here we go. This is the point where you get something to do on the back of this. So here's So what set this particular point in time, I think there's an activation fee of $5 or £5 to actually set up an account. If you haven't got an account already, that's the extent of your commitment. I'd also like you to set up a Bing Ads account, because primarily those are going to be the two platforms that we're going to spend most of the time that we're involved on this particular program. We're going to be doing most of the activity in AdWords and Bing, because ultimately they account for probably 90% of the market, maybe even higher than that. So I guess proportionately, I think that's the way in which the time that we actually spend looking at those should be covered. And then on the next page, I'm going to sort of go through, there's a bit of a toolkit of other things that I think would be a benefit for you to have. Right, so there's something called Dropbox. And what I'm going to suggest you do is if you haven't got a Dropbox account already, then I would encourage you to set one up. What I'm actually going to do as part of the follow-up from my perspective in terms of this session, I'm actually going to create a shared folder for people that have attended this session. And the idea behind it is that anything that we create, whether it's a AdWords editor spreadsheet or something like that, all of the information and stuff that we create will actually go into that Dropbox account. So that gives us the ability to kind of share information. Again, one of the things that we'll look at Google Analytics. Technically, PPC, it's an important part of the ecosystem. And the things that you can actually do is you can create what are known as custom dashboards and custom reports. Yeah, so rather than you guys having to go and create all those things from scratch yourself, I'd managed to spend a lot of time working out sort of information that I think it would be important to have, and I'll make sure that those are made available to you. I don't know if you've heard of something called Evernote. Evernote is a sort of a website or a clipping service. So again, one of the things I want you to do is to set up an Evernote account, because again, I'll create a shared folder on Evernote that will house all of the PPC information and various bits and pieces around that, and that will give you a good outlook on what sort of things to look for. There's something called TeamViewer. It's something that it is free. I mean, all of these things are free, kind of out of the box. There is actually there is a product called TeamViewer, and effectively TeamViewer is sort of like a screen sharing service and a file transfer service. So again, the idea behind it is I want to be able to, if we get to the point where we're talking on a group basis, one-to-one basis, I want to be able to share my screen with you and show you what's going on. I want you to set up a Skype account, an AIM account. So again, I have sort of groups of people that I talk to both on Skype and on AIM, and then on Google+, you'll actually get a Google+ account when you sign up for AdWords, but I would definitely suggest you set up a Google+ account, because I do a lot of hangouts with people where I talk specifically about some of the issues. Again, it's one of those. It's a great opportunity. If I consult normally on an hourly basis, I normally charge a lot of money. This is an opportunity for you to talk to me on an individual basis without having to pay those sorts of fees. I mean, I'm in a generous mood. So once you've actually done that, what I want you to do is I want you to send me an email with your Google account ID, which when you actually log into your Google AdWords account, it'll be in the top right-hand corner. It's in the format of 3 digits with a hyphen, 3 digits with a hyphen, and then 4 digits. And if you could send that email to jim@jimbanks.co, then they'll obviously get that. That will effectively give me access to your Google account through the course of this process, and ultimately I want to get to the point where I can say, yeah, if you have a specific problem, I can jump into the account, help you out, and then when you get to the point where you go, okay, Jim, I'm fine with this, I can move forward, you can just relinquish the access that I have to your account and go on away from it. But it would definitely be a benefit for you to kind of do that. That way you can get some good hands-on sort of support and help in setting up these campaigns for you. Because it's important that you have the right structure, the right sort of layout and everything, and I'll sort of help you individually on that. You could add JimBanks46 to your AIM account. Yeah, and if you can say when you actually make the request that you're actually from this webinar. I get a lot of weird and wacky people trying to add me on AIM, and I would hate to decline your request on the basis that I didn't know that you'd come from this webinar. And then same thing on Skype. If you can add Jim_Banks to Skype, and again, say you're from this webinar, and then add me on Google+. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, as much as that's a horrible number, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to include my URL. I've got your email address. I'll actually request or send you the information of how you can actually do that, and then we can kind of touch base moving forward. So once you've actually done that, once you've actually set up your AdWords account, set up your Bing account, I'll request permission to access your account to help you out. If you've never had an AdWords account before, that Google had given me to distribute to new advertisers, and these are in denomination of £75, and all you need to do is you need to make a commitment to spend £25. So effectively, you're going to get £100 worth of advertising for the cost of £25. So in some respects, what I found is most advertisers, if they make mistakes, they usually make mistakes in their first £100. So this is a great opportunity for you to have a controlled environment, get some advertising going, hopefully make some sales. Yeah, and if you can make some good sales, then you're absolutely in heaven from there on. If you want to have that experimental opportunity, this is a great opportunity for you to kind of do that. What I would say is if you already have a Google account, if you have a different credit card, then it would be good if you can, use that different credit card, then you might be able to get another voucher to use for that purpose. And just for those of you that are based in North America, £100 equates to around about $160, and you get that for $40. And clearly this is completely optional. You don't have to do it, but if you do, it'll make your life and my life a lot easier moving forward. So just to kind of recap, I've obviously tried to keep things as simple as possible. I apologize for those of you that may have had some difficulty with some of the audio. We'll definitely be ramping up next session. The plan is that the next session will be same time a week from today. And that's all I wanted to cover. We've gone for just under an hour, and I will